Good morning, children. Today, in Social Science and History in Class 9, we continue the chapter Nazism and the Rise of Hitler. Hitler had promised his people that Germany would become a strong nation, and Hitler chose war as a way out of the approaching crisis. That is, that he felt that he had to expand the territory and for resources also. So he chose war as a way out of the approaching crisis and invested in rearmament heavily. Rearmament means armament actually means weapons, military weapons and equipment, and rearmament so that militarily they would be very strong and be able to conquer other places. So he invested heavily in rearmament. And why? Because he wanted resources could be accumulated, and this was adopted by means of expansion of territory. So we see that this is what he decided now, this is what he resolved. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and this started a war with France and England. So this was the beginning, one can say, in September 1939 when Germany invaded Poland and the war with France and England began. Then in September 1940, a Tripartite Pact was signed. That means involving three countries. A pact, that is agreement, was signed between Germany, Italy and Japan. That meant that Germany had the support of Italy and Japan also, and this strengthened Hitler's claim to international power. That meant when countries like Japan and Italy came with Germany, obviously Hitler's strength increased. Puppet regimes were installed in a large part of Europe. That meant wherever those countries where they supported the Nazis and Hitler, so that is how he was able to get more and more power. By the end of 1940, Hitler was at the pinnacle of his power. That meant that gradually when all these important countries supported him, obviously his power increased tremendously. So now he wanted to achieve his long-term aim, and the long-term aim of Hitler was to conquer Eastern Europe. So in June 1941, Hitler attacked Soviet Union. This was a blunder on his part. This was a mistake on his part because the army was very strong. The Soviet army was very strong. So in this historic blunder, Hitler exposed the German front to British aerial bombing. So on one side he had the British who bombed Germany, who bombed aerially, and on the eastern front the powerful Soviet armies were there. So on both fronts, both western and eastern fronts, Germany was not able to bear the attack on both sides. And the Soviet Red Army defeated Germany at Stalingrad. So we see that how Germany was defeated by the Soviets. In the beginning, the US remained neutral. That means they were not a part of the war in the Second World War that we are talking about. Now, when Japan extended its support to Hitler and bombed the US base at Pearl Harbor, the US entered the Second World War. Till then, they kept out of it. But when Pearl Harbor was attacked by Japan, US entered the Second World War. It ended in May 1945 with Hitler's defeat. Japan surrendered in August 1945 after the US dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where that was terrible on the part of US to do that, because there was so much of destruction and loss of human life, and people suffered for years to come. So we see that how Hitler expanded and yet was defeated by the Soviet army. Now if we see on the map out here, this is the expansion of Nazi power, that is Europe in 1942. This was at that time the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic at that time. Then here is Germany. This is Austria and Slovakia that he conquered. Then here is France. This is Italy and United Kingdom. So we see that how he was defeated, Hitler was defeated by the Soviet Red Army at Stalingrad. So the Nazi worldview now we take up. Crimes were committed by the Nazis. So many atrocities and crimes were committed on the people, and this was the result of a system of belief and a set of practices. That is, they felt that Nazis were the strongest race. The Nazi ideology was synonymous with Hitler's worldview. That means, so he says that according to this, there was no equality between people. That is, Hitler believed in that, and then that was what the Nazi ideology was, that there was no equality, people were not equal. It was actually a racial hierarchy. That meant there were some people who were superior and at the top, while there were others who were at the bottom, like the Jews. So this was the view of the Nazis. So it was this racial hierarchy in which the blonde, blue-eyed German Nordic Aryans were at the top. That means that they were superior, and they were considered to be superior and at the top of this hierarchy system. While the Jews were located at the lowest rank, they were considered to be the lowest. And they were the biggest enemies of the Germans. All other colored people were placed in between, depending on their external features. So Hitler's rule was most barbaric in the world history. And the Nazi argument was that the strongest race would survive and the weak ones would perish. So we see that the ideas behind Hitler's racism, actually it was borrowed from the ideas of Charles Darwin and Herbert Spencer. Charles Darwin, who tried to explain the creation of plants and animals through the concept of evolution and natural selection. So Herbert Spencer added to the idea of survival of the fittest, and that is what he also believed in. According to this idea, only those species survived on Earth that could adapt themselves to the changing climatic conditions. Otherwise, they would not be able to survive. So that was the survival of the fittest. And these ideas also were used by the racist thinkers and politicians to justify the imperial rule over the conquered people. And the Nazi believed in the strongest race would survive while the weak ones would perish. So the Aryan race was considered to be the finest, and they had to maintain the purity, become stronger and dominate the world. So those were the ideas that Hitler also had, and that was the ideology of the Nazis also, that they did everything possible in order to maintain the purity of the race, become the strongest and dominate the rest of the world. Thank you.